What's up guys, welcome back to Phil Always Wins. Today we are going to be doing a full card breakdown of UFC Fight Night in China. Deiveson Figueiredo taking on Yadong. Before we get into it, don't forget to follow me on Instagram to be the first to know about my weekly UFC betting tips. To kick off the night, we have a women's strawweight fight between Loma Lookboonme taking on Jaqueline Amorim. And this is a classic striker versus grappling matchup. And I'm going to back Amorim to get the win in this fight, because her grappling is clearly the bigger threat. She already has 3 submissions in the UFC, and once she gets this fight to the ground, she's constantly threatening submissions. Loma is obviously the better striker in this matchup because she has a Muay Thai background and she's very technical on the feet, but the problem with her is that she doesn't have that much power or finishing capabilities. Almost all of her fights have gone the distance, and if she gets controlled for the majority of this fight, then I don't expect her or trust her to be able to find a finish. I will give it to her, Loma does have some decent takedown defense, but then again, she has never faced anyone with Amorim's level of grappling. Amorim's going to start shooting for takedowns from the get-go, and Loma's going to spend too much time defending submissions and trying to get back to her feet instead of actually fighting and winning the rounds. Loma needs to keep this fight standing for all 3 rounds in order to win this fight, but I think that Amorim's grappling should be the difference, and I reckon that she'll find a submission in round 2. Next up, we have a featherweight bout between Khangjie taking on Rodrigo Vera, where I think that Khangjie is going to get the win. Now, coming into this fight, Khangjie does have the striking advantage, and he is fighting in his home country, but although I'm picking him to win, I'm not too confident that he's going to get the W. In his last fight, Khangjie won a split decision robbery where he got controlled for all 3 rounds, and this Saturday, he was initially supposed to fight Raymond Tavares, who's primarily a stand-up fighter. So this whole time, Khangjie wasn't training to fight a grappler, and given that he got controlled for all 3 rounds in his last fight by a grappler, could be quite concerning. He's facing a very dangerous grappler in Rodrigo Vera, whose current record is 21-1 with 8 knockouts and 3 submission wins. Vera's coming in hot straight into enemy territory where he's going to be making his UFC debut on only a week's notice, and although his record seems pretty intimidating, he's really only fought bums. Most of Vera's fights have gone the distance, and I think that he'll control Khangjie for the majority of the fight, but I reckon that Khangjie will land the more damaging strikes. Now, Chinese judges have been known to be a little bit biased, and given that this fight is probably going to be pretty close, I think that Khangjie is going to get the win via split decision robbery. Next up, we have a women's strawweight fight between Zhang taking on Angela Hill, where I think that Xiong is going to get the win. Angela Hill does have a lot of UFC experience, but she's already 40 years old and she's currently rocking a 2-fight losing streak, with her last win coming by way of split decision. It feels like she's coming towards the end of her career, while Xiong is making her UFC debut this Saturday with a big opportunity to make a statement in front of her home crowd. The main reason I like Xiong is because I think that she's going to dominate this fight on the feet. Xiong is the more physical fighter and she tends to throw with more power, and her pressure is going to make Hill very uncomfortable. Hill can still touch her with volume as she always does, but Xiong's shots are going to look way more damaging, and that could really persuade the judges. Now, the only real problem is that we have seen Xiong struggle against grapplers before, and I think the only real way that Hill wins this fight is if she creates scrambles and somehow finds a submission. I don't think that Hill's going to be able to outpower Xiong, and I also don't see her winning clean striking exchanges for 3 rounds. She needs to make this fight messy, force grappling exchanges, and hopefully find Xiong in a mistake where she can grab a submission. But then again, Hill doesn't have the best fight IQ, and she may decide to just stand and bang, which in that case, I think she's going to lose. I do think she's experienced enough to survive against Xiong, but ultimately, I think Xiong's going to pick her shots and win the exchanges and win a unanimous decision win. Next up, we have a flyweight fight between Ray Tsuruya taking on Gurule, where I think that Tsuruya is going to get the win. Now, Ray Tsuruya is a very talented grappler with 8 of his 10 wins coming by way of finish, and he's coming off his first career loss to Joshua Van, but I'll let that slide given that he's the current champ. Initially, he was supposed to be fighting Jesus Aguilar before he pulled out, and now his opponent Gurule is stepping in on a week's notice, who literally just fought a week ago on the Allen vs Costa card. Gurule did win his fight last week against Daniel Perez by unanimous decision, so he should still be in shape, and he did look pretty good in that fight. He pressured Perez pretty well and he landed the cleaner shots and even hit a suplex. Beating Perez for 3 rounds in a striking heavy fight is not the same as taking a short notice fight against a guy like Tsuruya, who wants to grapple for all 3 rounds. Tsuruya is going to keep getting to the body lock, keep attacking the hips, keep forcing scrambles, and make Gurule work every time they clinch. And you can't properly prepare for that grappling pace in only 1 week. Gurule can make this fight competitive, and I actually think if he stops the takedowns that he has a chance to win this fight. But ultimately, Tsuruya should be able to get the takedowns, control positions, and I think he'll find a submission in early round 2. Next up, we have a bantamweight fight between Qileng and Aori taking on Cody Haddon, where I think that Haddon's gonna get the win. Cody Haddon is relatively new to MMA, and his current record stands at 8-1 with 5 knockouts and 2 submissions. But he's the more well-rounded fighter who has more ways to win this fight. On the feet, Haddon can definitely compete with Aori, and he throws with confidence with 5 knockouts on his record, and he clearly has respectable power. This isn't a fight where he's going to panic wrestle from the opening bell. He can strike with Aori, make the fight competitive on the feet, and then mix in the grappling. And that's where the difference is for me. Aori wants to keep this fight standing at all costs because that's where he's most dangerous. He's a more experienced fighter with decent power, and he's fighting in his home country in China. If this fight stays standing, it could be a pretty close fight with the judges swaying towards Aori, but I'm going to take the fighter who can strike, wrestle, and threaten submissions. Haddon just needs to make Aori respect the takedown threats, and he'll be able to land the bigger strikes, and I reckon he'll stun him and find a submission in round 2. Next up, we have a fight between Meng and Jose Henrique, and I'm going to be favoring Meng to get the win, but I don't think this is an easy matchup at all. Ding is an aggressive fighter who usually controls the pace of the fight, and given that he's fighting in his home country, that could really sway the judges. Now, Henrique is pretty tall for the division, standing at 6'3", and he likes to use his reach advantage to stay long and pick his shots from the outside. And that could be a major concern for Meng, given that we saw him struggle to find his range not too long ago against Rami Hamid in the Contender Series. If Ding once again fails to close the distance, then Henrique can keep touching him from the outside and win minutes without taking much risk. But Henrique is currently 8-1, and the biggest concern is that he hasn't fought since 2024. Now he's making his UFC debut in China against a fighter who's way more active and has a lot more experience. It's one thing to use your range well regionally, but it's different when you're dealing with UFC pressure, the crowd, and an aggressive opponent who keeps trying to close the distance. I think it'll be a close stand-up fight, but I think that Ding's constant pressure will be enough to sway the judges to win a unanimous decision win. Next up, we have a middleweight bout between Yi-sak taking on Luis Felipe Diaz, where I think that Diaz is gonna get the win. They're both making their UFC debut this Saturday, but I think that Diaz looks like the more intimidating and dangerous fighter. Diaz's main strength is his grappling, but he's not all too bad on the feet either. He uses his striking well enough to gain respect, and he works his way into the clinch where he tends to get his takedowns and threatens a lot of submissions. The only concern with Diaz is his gas tank. Because he packs so much muscle, he tends to get tired pretty easily. Diaz is very dangerous early in the fight, but he starts to slow down the longer the fight goes. So if Lee survives the early grappling exchanges, he could start to take over this fight. But an important fact to pick out is that although Lee's record looks pretty good at 8-1, his opponents have a combined record of 0-12. That's right, you heard me right. His opponents have never won a fight, so you really have to question the quality of opponents that he's fighting. Diaz has proven himself way more than Lee has, and he has beaten better opponents than Lee, and he's the more stronger and more athletic fighter coming into this matchup, and I reckon he'll be able to effortlessly take Lee down and find a submission in round 1. And just like that, we are on the main card of the evening where we have a flyweight bout between Alex Perez taking on Mudareji, where I think that Perez is going to get the win. Mudareji is the better striker in this matchup, but not by a significant amount. Perez does have decent combinations and powers, and he knows how to put his hands together, and he's coming off a round 1 knockout against Charles Johnson. Mudareji is currently rocking a 3-fight winning streak, but none of them were against a fighter as well-rounded as Alex Perez. Now, Perez isn't the most dangerous wrestler, but he can definitely take Mudareji down. Holding him down is a harder part, but even if Mudareji manages to get back up, I think that Perez is just going to keep shooting and make him deal with that grappling threat the whole fight. Now, Mudareji usually fights behind his jab because of his reach advantage, but the problem with Su is that he's too limited. He has almost no defensive wrestling abilities, and if he can't keep this fight standing, then he's definitely going to lose. Perez doesn't completely rely on his wrestling to win fights, and if he decides to exchange strikes, it'll probably be pretty close. The difference is going to be Perez's constant pressure and control time, and as long as the judges don't rob Perez, I reckon he'll mix everything in pretty well and win a unanimous decision win. Next up, we have a welterweight bout between Muslim Salikov taking on Jake Mathews, where I think that Mathews is going to get the win. Both of these guys are coming off a loss, but I think that Mathews is the overall better fighter, and he has a clearer path to victory. Salikov has tremendous power, and he's most dangerous on the feet with his last 2 wins coming by way of knockout, and he also has 15 knockouts on his record. But he is already 42 years old, and his durability has started to look pretty questionable. He's coming off a knockout loss to Uros Medic, and he's also been knocked out 3 times in the UFC. Muslim has slowed down, and I don't think that he'll be able to fight for all 3 rounds. He'll need to come out aggressive, and I think he only wins this fight if he can find that one big knockout shot early in the fight. Mathews is the younger fighter at only 30 years old who's very experienced for his age, and he's been fighting in the UFC since 2014. He's fought tougher and more dangerous opponents, such as Michael Morales, who hits like a truck, and he was still able to stand with Morales for 3 rounds, even winning a round. I think Mathews is good enough on the feet to hold his own, but his real advantage is in his grappling. He's very dominant on the ground, and he threatens a lot of submissions, and I think that he's going to mainly use his striking to set up the takedowns, drag Salikov into uncomfortable positions, and make him work early in the fight. I reckon Mathews will be able to control him, slow him down, and eventually find a submission in round 2. Next up, we have a very close matchup between Kai Asukura taking on Cameron Smotherman, but I'm leaning towards Asukura to get the win. Both of these fighters are currently on a 2-fight losing streak, and they both have one thing in common. They both absolutely suck on the ground, and we can expect an absolute war on the feet because the loser will most probably get cut by the UFC. Although they're both strikers, their styles are completely different. Asukura is the faster and more creative kickboxer with unpredictable yet calculative combinations, which is why there was so much hype around his name before he entered the UFC. He was very hesitant in his first 2 UFC fights, mainly because of the takedown threats, but he doesn't need to worry about the takedowns in this fight. So he can open up, throw freely, and fight the fight that suits him best. Now Smotherman is dangerous in his own way, but I think his style is going to be a major problem. He's a flat-footed striker who fights a more patient fight, who struggles to produce output. If he had power in his hands, then the lack of output would be less of a problem, but the problem is that he doesn't have that one-shot knockout threat, so if he starts falling behind on the scorecards, he's definitely going to lose this fight. I think that simply Asukura's speed is going to be the difference. He'll be able to land first and get out of position before Smotherman even has the chance to counter, and I think that Smotherman's going to be playing catch-up the whole fight. Smotherman may be forced to take more risk being down 2 rounds, and I think he's going to get reckless, and that's when Kai Asukura is going to capitalize. I think Asukura either wins by a unanimous 30-27 unanimous decision, or he finds the knockout in late round 3. Next up, we have a heavyweight bout between Sergi Pavlovich taking on Tallison Teixeira, and this is a fight where I'll predict Sergi to win, but I'm going to sprinkle a little bit of money on Teixeira. As much as I don't think Teixeira is going to win this fight, he shouldn't be a plus 400 underdog. The reason Teixeira is a massive underdog in this fight is because despite winning a unanimous decision, he gassed out badly in his last fight against a retiring Tuivasa, which isn't the best look. But we have to take into account that that fight was unexpectedly more of a grappling fight. But even still, nobody likes backing a fighter with a poor gas tank. Teixeira's best weapon is his jab because he's very tall for the division, standing at 6'7", and he has a reach advantage in almost every fight. He generates a lot of power, but because he's so tall, he also doesn't really move his head all too much, and he's pretty damn easy to hit. And you can't take many clean shots against a fighter like Sergi because he's a very dangerous power puncher, with all 6 of his knockouts in the UFC coming in round 1. There's no doubt that Sergi also has the experience and cardio advantage, so the longer this fight goes, the more it favors Sergi. But Sergi is a brawler, and that gives Teixeira an opportunity to land something big too, which is why I'll sprinkle some money on him. But ultimately, I think that Sergi is just the more proven and overall better fighter, and I reckon he'll find a knockout in round 1. Next up, we have a light heavyweight bout between Zhang Mingyang taking on Alonzo Menifield, where I think that Mingyang is going to get the win. Zhang Mingyang is coming off a fluke loss to Johnny Walker, and I think that he's going to make a comeback win in his hometown in front of his home crowd. They do have a combined record of 23 knockouts, and I don't think this is going to be a walk in the park for Zhang because they both have power. Alonzo definitely has the experience advantage coming into this fight, having fought in the UFC since 2019, and he's beaten some respectable names such as Dustin Jacoby and Jimmy Crute. Zhang is more of a prospect who's beaten all the oldies of the UFC such as Anthony Smith, and I honestly think they're still trying to build Zhang up by giving him matchups he's likely to win. The UFC loves building Chinese fighters, and I'm not saying he'll win just because the UFC wants him to win, but the judges in China have been known to be a little bit biased, which could help if this reaches a decision. But ultimately, I think that Zhang's aggression is what's going to win him this fight. He likes to control the pace of the fight, and Alonso is going to be fighting on the back foot for the majority of this fight. Alonso is also pretty hittable, and I think that Zhang's going to be able to land some big punches when pressing him against the cage and find a knockout in round 2. And just like that, we are on the main event of the evening where we have Song Yadong taking on Figueiredo. And initially, I thought this was going to be a close fight in favor of Figgy, but after taking a closer look, I'm heavily favoring Song Yadong. The reason I was backing Figgy is because I forgot that this was a 5-round fight, and I think that Figgy's going to have a strong start to the fight. Figgy's a high-level grappler who shared the octagon with the best of the best. Just like any grappler, his whole game plan is to try and control Song Yadong on the ground for as long as possible and possibly find a submission. And grapplers usually have a very dominant start to their fight because both fighters are still full of energy and they're both dry, so that prevents them from slipping around. So I reckon that Figgy will be able to control Song Yadong for the majority of round 1, but I don't think Figgy can keep that pace up for 5 rounds. Hopefully the odds shift in favor of Figgy after round 1, which is when I'm going to be betting on Song Yadong to win, because currently he's just not bettable. He's like times 1.1 or something. Song has proven to be a dangerous striker, and it's no secret that he's 10 times better than Figgy in the striking department. But what really impressed me was his takedown defense against high-level opponents. That being said, Figgy is still the most dangerous grappler that he's going to face, and he could very much get subbed early in the fight. But I think that Song's athletic advantage is going to be enough to keep this fight standing, where he'll be able to piece Figgy up on the feet and eventually find a knockout in round 3. So that's gonna do it for my full card breakdown of UFC Fight Night Song Yadong versus Figgy. Let me know in the comments what you guys think, and don't forget to follow me on Instagram to be the first to know about my weekly UFC betting tips. Peace.